This conference will now be recorded.
So hello and welcome. In this video we are going to discuss about classes and objects. So what class is actually, here is a definition that is there on the screen. Class is basically a user defined or new data type that can be used to create objects. And uh, class we use basically to represent the entities. So what entity is actually, we are going to discuss that first. Then we will come to how we can represent entities in Java. So entity is any can be of uh, tangible type or intangible type. Tangible means that you can see or touch. For example, if we talk about a car, you can see the car or touch the car. So car is an entity. Bank account is another example of an entity, but bank account is a abstract kind of entity, or we can say it's intangible. We can't look at it or touch it physically. So every entity has some features associated with it. If we talk about bank account, then a bank account will have account number, account balance, account type, and so on. And similarly, a car will have some attributes or features. For example, the color of the car, brand of the car, model of the car, engine number, and so on. So every physical or entity or logical entity is associated with some attributes. So, and also the entities has some operations that can be performed on it. For example, on a bank account, we can perform a deposit operation, we can perform withdrawal operation, and we can open a bank account, close a bank account. So these are the operations that can be performed on a particular entity. So if we talk about the entities in general, that means that is a class. For example, student. If we talk about the entire class of students, then we can say it's a Java class. So if we talk about a particular student, that means we are talking about the object. So a class is basically a template as it is shown here on the slide. Also, a class is a template. Template means every object of that category will have the same attributes but will have different values. If we talk about the student, every student will have a roll number, name, contact number, gender, and so on. So student in general is a class, it's a template. If we talk about a particular student, let's say if we talk about one of your classmates, Gurvinder, then Gurvinder is an example of an object. And in case of Java, we call the object of a class as instance. So instance means object of the class. So how we can create classes in Java? This we are going to discuss through this slide. So if you want to create a class in Java, define a class in Java, first you have to write the keyword class and then name of the class. Again, the name of the class should follow the identifier rules. Then within the parentheses of within the parentheses that follows this class name declaration, you will put some of the variables or attributes and operations within the body of the class. So body of the class is represented by a pair of braces. So it's shown over here, pair of braces. So this brace is there, and within the pair of braces, what you can write is what you can write is its instance variable. Basically, these are the variables as we discussed earlier, as in case of the bank account, one of the attribute will be account number. So all the attributes you want to keep in that class, you will define over here. Those attributes will be of a certain type of variables. So these all are the variables that we can declare within a class, and some operations will also be there in the class. So this is an operation. So operation is basically represented by or realized by the methods. So this is one of the operation, and operations are realized by the methods. So this is the method name. We are going to discuss the methods in more detail in the coming classes. So this is one of the method, this is another method, and these are the variables. So if we conclude that in a class declaration we can keep some of the variables representing the attributes of the entity or the class, and some of the methods, and those methods will represent the operations mm, of the entity that it allows us to perform. Then there is another example based on that. This all the variables. I'm going to show you one example of this in the coming slide. Instance variable and method. What is instance variable? We are going to discuss it soon. So this is a simple example of a class. In this class, that is representing a box. So box is basically have three attributes. It can have some width, height, and depth. So these three variables are representing the width, height, and depth of a box. So we haven't used any method in this. So soon we will include the methods in the class as well. So this class is having only the attributes. The class name is box, and it has three attributes: width, height, and depth. So keep in mind, if you just declare the class, Java will not allocate memory for the class. It's just a template. Memory is allocated for the variables of type class. So if you create a variable of this class type, box type, then only the memory will be allocated. And the variable of class type is called instance. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you how you can create the instance. So in this example, we are creating the instance of the class box that we defined on the previous slide. So how we can create the instance of a class? So first we will discuss about the right hand side. So as we discussed in the array chapter, if you want to allocate memory, you have to use the new keyword. So this new keyword is basically allocates the memory. And after that, you will write the name of the class whose variable or object you want to create, and then a pair of parentheses. So what is the purpose of this? This we will discuss in the coming classes as well. What will happen if you create the object? So I'm going to leave it for the coming slides. So this is the class name, and this will allocate the memory. So basically, a constructor is called when the object is created, but we are not uh, going into that much detail. So simply you remember that when you create the object, you have to put the keyword new, after that the name of the class and parenthesis, and this right hand side will allocate the memory as shown here. This is the object that is created by the right hand side, and the reference of the object will be copied into a variable that is of type box. So this is a variable of type box. So when you will assign it, the reference of this object that I have circled over here will get copied into my box variable. So this is the my box variable, right? So this operation can be performed in two steps as well. You can first create a reference of type box using this line. So this is creating a reference of type mbox. So mbox is a variable of type reference. Soon you will get to know what is the meaning of reference. So it is similar to pointer variable of C, but actually this Java doesn't support pointers, so it uses a different term, reference variables. So this variable of type class is basically a reference variable. So this is a reference variable, and it is initialized to null automatically. So initially its value will be null. I'm putting a cross over here to indicate that this is null actually in the beginning. Then the next line is allocating the memory, this line, and assigning the reference of the memory just allocated to my box. So this second is representing that. The first line is representing this. This is the case. And the second line will allocate memory and assign the reference of the object just created to my box reference variable. So the variable that you have created over here is called instance. So this is my box is basically instance of class box. Sometimes the languages use a word object. So object or instance are basically the same thing. So this my box is, we can say it's an object or instance of class my box. So these are the variables of particular instance: width, height, and depth. Width, height, and depth are the members or variables of my box. So these are called instance variables. Every instance will have its own variables. Again, this we will discuss in the coming slides as well. So this is how we create the memory for the objects, or we declare the objects, or is declare the and instantiate the objects, we can say. Then in the previous slide, we discussed that this mbox has three instance variable: width, height, and depth. If you want to access any member or assign value to any member of this box, then you can use this dot operator notation. So this dot operator notation is used to access the instance variable. So here we have used my box. My box is the name of the instance variable that we created over here as from this slide. And then on the after that you will put the dot, that is then the member name is width. So this will assign 100 to the width member of my box. So here the 100 will be assigned. If I put that value over here, let me put that here, this width member value will become 100 with that the next line. If you want to assign the value to height, then you will put my box dot height is equal to some value, and my box dot depth is equal to some value. So like this, you can assign values to the members of the instance, uh, or we can say we can assign the values to the instance variable. So keep in mind, I'm going to repeat the term. This is called instance variable, or just instance, and these are just instance. This is called just instance or a variable or object of class, and these are the instance variable. Width is a instance variable, height is an instance variable, depth is an instance variable, but this is object or just instance my box. So this, if I quickly repeat this new is basically used to allocate the memory. This is a keyword and it allocates the memory, right? This is the only purpose of the new, and we are going to use it in the coming lectures as well. And here is the complete example based on the box class. So first time we are going to create two classes. So one class is box class, other one is the box demo class. So in one class we are putting the method or writing the method main, and in the other class, this user defined class, the class is same. It has three members: width, height, and depth. So this line is creating the object as we discussed earlier. In this example, we are finding the volume of the box. So first we are assigning values to the instance variable width, height, and depth. So how we can assign that, we discussed in the previous slide as well. First we'll write the instance, that is my box, dot instance variable. So in the coming classes I will use a variable or name object for the instance, because these are also called instance, to avoid the confusion between instance and instance variable. So this is the object my box dot, this is the instance variable, and we are assigning 10 to it. Similarly, we are assigning 20 to height and 15 to the depth number of the my box. So after that, we are finding the volume in the next line. And how we can find the volume, you will just multiply width, height, and depth of my box. So in the next line we are multiplying depth, height, and width, and the result that we will get from this expression, we are assigning that to the variable volume. That volume we have already defined, it is of type double, and the next line will display volume is equal to this much. So one important point over here is, if you want to access the instance variable, you can use the dot notation and after that the instance variable name. So this is the very simple example based on classes. If we try this on Eclipse, then see what will happen. I'm going to show you that on Notepad, because there is one important point to notice. And if you compile this program, and first important point is, you will save this program with the name box demo.java, and this is not compulsory condition. As we discussed in the very first class, you can use any name for the class under which you will save these two classes. I'm going to show you this on a notepad, because that from there you will understand better. So we are going to implement this problem on notepad first, and then we will discuss the next section. So here what I will do is, first we will open the command prompt, and in the command prompt we will go to the root directory. So this is the root directory, C or C prompt. After that, we'll open the program files folder, then we'll open Java folder. After that, go to the JDK bin folder, and after that go to bin. So here is the compiler, Java file is there. So I'm going to create a file over here, notepad. Uh, my program name is, let's suppose, test123.java. This is the name of my, yes. Now let's code that problem that we just discussed. So here I'm going to write the code that we just discussed. Our class name is going to zoom it a bit. Zoom it. So this is my class box. We have three members in it. Integer. I'm using these three words: length of the box, breadth of the box, and height of the box. Right? These are the three instance variables. Then we have one class. I'm going to write it public class. Class name is, let's say, ABC. Right? Then within this class, what we are going to do is first we will create the object of box class. So this is the class name box. Its object is, let's suppose, ob1. Now if you want to assign values to LBH members of ob1, then you will use this notation. ob1.l is some value. Then ob1.b assign some value to the breadth member. And after that, the third line is ob1.h is equal to, let's suppose, 4. Now, if you want to find out the volume, I can declare the variable over here as well, int, double or int, because uh, all the members of the variable instance variable of type integer, then I can use integer as well. Integer v is equal to ob1 dot l into ob1 dot b into ob1 dot h. So this is how you can find the volume. And then is system dot out dot println to display the output. So I'm going to just print the v value of v. So the important point that I want to show is what will happen when you will compile it. So keep in mind we have the class name abc and we have the class box and our program name is text123.java. Now let's compile this program. So I'm going to compile it here using Java C, then name of the program, and the name of the program as we discussed earlier is it is text123.java. So you will name it here test123.java. Oh, it's a different name, text. Okay, it's text, not test. It's Java C text123.java. So there is one issue. It's saying that error identifier expected. Let me check. Is there any error? ob1. Okay, we haven't written the main method, so this is the mistake. Public static void main, and this entire code should be in main. So string type array args. So this is the case. We're putting the brackets over here to complete it. So this is the case now. Now let's move on to the compiling window again, and public static. Okay, let me remove it because it is public. I will explain. Sorry. This class to remove. Compile it. Variable ob1 might not be initialized, so we haven't allocated the memory. We are getting this error, variable ob1 might not be initialized because we forgot to allocate the memory to it. So there should be new and then box and brackets. This will allocate the memory. Let's save it. Switch to the command prompt again. I'm going to clear the window using CLS. So use over here Java text. See, now it has compiled well because we have compiled it successfully. So now the thing is, what I want to show you, that is the important point. The first important point is, if we look at the directory of this, right, there will be two files. One will be box.class, other will be abc.class, because we have two classes, box and ABC. So when you compile a Java program, a class file is created for all the classes that are there in the program. So I'm going to show you that. For that, I have written this example. So we have two classes. One is box. So there should be one class file. So this is the class file corresponding to the box, right? This one, box.class. Other class should be there and its name should be abc.class. So that is there. So the important point is, whenever you compile the program, your program creates a class file, and the number of class files that are created will be equal to the number of classes that are there in the program. So because in our program we have two classes, one is ABC and other one is box. So when you will compile this program, Java will create two bytecode files. One bytecode file name will be abc.class. Other bytecode file name will be box.class. Right now, the main method is in ABC class. So when you will run it, you will write the name of the class that is having the main method. So how I can run it? So for that I have to write Java. Then after that, name of the class that is having the main method. So main method is in ABC class. So I will put over here Java ABC, and it is giving me this output 240. This is the volume of the box. Another important point is, I removed public from here because this condition is only possible if the class is not public. Condition is your program name can be different from the class name if the class is not public. That's why I removed public from here. If your class name is public, then the program name, this name should be same as that of your class name, right? This is the important point. So if you want to keep the file name different from the class name that is including the main method, then in that case you shouldn't declare it public. So this is all about this program. If you have any doubt about this problem, you can leave your doubts in the chat box.
This conference will now be recorded.
Here is another slide on the same concept. So in this example, we are basically discussing the reference variable, right? What is the purpose of it? So the very first line is basically creating one object. So again, right hand side, I have written the keyword new. This will allocate the memory. And after that, we have name of the class box. So as we discussed earlier, this statement on the right hand side will allocate memory for the object, and the object is shown here on the right hand side. So this is the object, and this object reference will be assigned to the uh, reference variable b1. So this will refer to this object first. After that, we are assigning b1 to b, right? So if you assign object to another reference variable, the important point is memory is not allocated. So this will not allocate memory or copy b1 object to b2. This will simply assign a reference of object to which b1 is referring to this variable b2. So that means after this statement, both b1 and b2 will start referring to the same object. So here it is shown um, that this b1 and b2 are referring to the same object. So if you change the values through b1, the values of b1 will get changed. If you change the values of this object through b1, the values of b2 will get changed, right? So this is the case. And if later on you assign null to any of these two variables b1 or b2, this will unhook the variable from the object. This I have shown in the next slide. So these two lines are the same as we discussed in the previous slide. But after writing some code that is shown over here with triple dot, if I put this line b1 is equal to null, so this means this v1 will be unhooked from this object or instance, right? And now it's not referring to the object, only the b2 is referring. And if you unhook the variable from the object, memory will not be deallocated. So this will not be deallocated. The object will remain in the memory because one reference to this object is still there in the memory, that is b2, right? But through b1, after writing this statement through b1, we will not be able to access these elements because this is now unhooked from the object. So the next slide is about methods. The methods are basically the functions, and this is the general form of method, as you have already studied these functions and C and C++ a lot. So we will quickly finish this topic. So whenever you want to write the method, there should be a method name, and this name should follow the rules of the identifiers. And there can be a return type of the method. Return types of data we have already discussed. Method can return any fundamental type like integer, float, double, right? Or it can return objects or variables, instances as well. Within the parenthesis of the method name, you will write the parameter list, the values that you want to pass the method. And this pair of braces basically represents the body of the method. In the body of the method, you will write the statements that will decide the purpose of this function, right? So function in a method, we can define it like this. A method is a set of statements that can perform a specific task. So for example, if you want to find out the square root of a number, so you can write your own code, you can write your own method to find the square root of the number. So in the coming slides, we are going to discuss this concept in more detail. So this is the slide about the methods that we will use in the class. So in this class box, we have used one method volume to find the volume of the box, right? So the instance variables are the same. We have three instance variable: width, height, and depth. And we have written one method in it, that is the volume. This volume method is returning void type data. So these methods that you will write in the class, these can access the instance variable or the members of the class directly. So these all are called members of the class. So this volume method can access the variable members of the class. So these are the variables members of the class. These can be directly accessed in the method. So here I'm using directly this width. So width means that is the member of the class. This width variable. So what this volume method is doing, it will print the result of width into height into depth on your screen when it will be called. So how we can call it, this is the important point. So this is the class now, and this class is having variables as well as a method in it. So here is the rest of the part of the class we implemented on the previous slide. So here in this slide, we are basically constructing an instance of the box class using this line. So we have two objects in this case. One is mybox1, and the second line will create another object, and that object is mybox2. So there are two objects. So if we represent it graphically, so here I can show you detail of this. This is one object, and this object will have three members. So I'm assuming that first one is width, second is height, and third is depth. So its reference is in a variable. So my box, I'm going to show you over here this with this representation. So my box one is the reference of, let's say, this object, and my box 2, let's say, is the reference of this object. So this right hand side is allocating the memory, and we are assigning reference to this. So if you write my box 10, so this will assign 10 to the first member of the object my box 1, and height, this will assign the second value to it, 20, and the third line will assign 15 to the third member, that is the depth member. Similarly, the next three line will assign 3, 6, and 9 to depth, width, height, and depth respectively. So the important point is here is these are called the instance variable, because every instance will have its own copy of the variable. So width, height, and depth, these are the instance variables of the instance mybox1. This width, height, and depth are the instance variables of mybox2. So every instance, every object will have its own copies of the variables. So if you call this mybox volume function with mybox1, so what will happen? This will be called. So the first important point to notice is, if you want to call a method, you have to use first the object name, then dot operator, after that the name of the method, and then parenthesis. So this call this method, and in this method we will get this result first, volume is, then it will multiply width, height, and depth of the uh, object with which this method is called, because we are calling this method with the mybox1 class. So this volume method will find a product of uh, width, height, and depth of mybox1. So you will get 10 into 20 into 15. So you will get 3000 as the result of this. So, right, so when you will call it second time with mybox2, again it's finding the product of width, height, and depth, but this time this width, height, and depth represents the instance variable of mybox2 object. So these three members will get multiplied, and you will get the corresponding output on the screen. That will be 162, I think. So you will get that result on the screen, right? So this will be the output of this case. So the next and last uh, last program of today's class that we are going to discuss. Now in this case, the box class is having a volume method, and this volume method is returning the value, right? So its return type is double. So what it is returning? It is returning width, height, and depth, product of width, depth, and height. So in the earlier here we can use either the parenthesis or you can use it without parenthesis, right? So that is optional. So you can use the parenthesis with return as well. So the important point is these two lines. I am going to explain these two lines only. So the first is the calling of the volume method, as we discussed in the previous slide. Whenever you want to call the method of a class, you have to use the first object name, then dot operator, and after that the method name. So this will call this my volume method with the my box one. So this will multiply width, height, and depth. Width, height, and depth of which object? My box one. So the my box one width, depth, and height are 10, 20, and 15. So you will get the output 3000 over here. This will be returned back to the left hand side variable. So the VOL value will be 3000, and the next line will print that value. Volume is equal to uh, this much, right? Volume is 3000. Then we are calling the same method again, my box2 dot volume. So this will be called again, this method will be called again, this one. When this will be called through this line, so it will find again the product of width, height, and depth. This time the value of width, height, and depth are 3, 6, and 9. So that product of 3, 6, and 9, which is 162, will be returned back to the calling method. So here it will be returned back to this variable volume, and with the next line you will get the value of the volume. So the important point of this program is every instance will have its own copy of the instance variable. This is the important point. And second is whenever you want to call the method of a class, you can call that with the name of the object and the dot operator. So first you will write the name of the object, then dot operator, then the name of the method. So this is all about this problem. If there is any doubt, you can leave your doubts in the comment section. Happy learning.